Hello everybody, Edre here, and today I'm going to be reviewing the new Dorian Electra album, My Agenda. Dorian Electra is an artist that stylistically has some similarities to the likes of 100 gecs, as well as even Charlie XCX in some spots. And if you have seen my reviews, or have seen me talking about 100 gecs or Charlie XCX on this channel, you know that I have quite mixed feelings. For one, I have yet to be impressed by really anything 100 gecs has done. Their debut album, to me, was just a hodgepodge mess with little focus and poor execution. And Charlie XCX, on the other hand, I do think has a lot more talent, is more likely to put out great material. Charlie from last year, I thought was a decent album. I didn't put it nearly as high up on any of my lists or in my mind as the likes of Fantano or a lot of other reviewers, and the same goes for how I'm feeling now, Charlie XCX's album, which came out this year. Once again, this style of music to me, it needs to be done almost perfectly to really have a lasting impact, unfortunately. And going into this album, my hopes were in the middle. It follows that glitchy, hyper, experimental pop that we have seen from, like I said, 100 gecs and even Dorian Electra in the past. And yet, they still seem to be in that early stage. And it's frustrating because I feel like this style of music could be done well if it is executed in the best possible way. However, I have yet to see it executed in that way. For example, the opening track, F the World, has some great ideas in it. Some really nice, nice is a weird way to put it, some really interesting and intriguing, melodies and soundscapes being scattered throughout. And I actually like the experimental element of the synth sounds. However, it's just the execution is sloppy and the arrangement is so sloppy that by the time the song is finished, you almost forget how it already went, and you almost forget all that. And unfortunately, this is a theme that pops up time and time and time and time again. A song like My Agenda did actually stick out to me the most out of any of the songs here, partly because of the interesting feature with the village people. And it does seem a bit more focused, but it's not long before you get into songs like Milady, which I think do have good lyrics. I think that good little guitar arpeggios, and overall the song starts strong, but it ends in another bad, really sloppy, really messy breakdown. And this is something that pops up quite and quite again. Well, I do think that this album, My Agenda, is better executed than the 100 gecs album that dropped this year and last year. I don't think it's nearly at that level of Charlie XCX, because it just feels to me like an album that is meant to be purposely weird, purposely hyper, purposely edgy in many spots, and you can do that and execute it well, and you could pull it off, but unfortunately a lot of the songs really don't pull it off for me. Perhaps the worst song on this album, in my opinion, is Sorry Bro. To me, it sounds like it is exactly pulled directly out of 1000 gecs, and it doesn't feel original to me. It doesn't feel like not, just in my opinion, it did not stick with me at all. A song like Barbie Boy is another one that has some really nice synth pads throughout it. I think the overall sound choices were really unique, really interesting, and I overall enjoyed it quite a bit. But it transitions into this really cheesy, really corny, I know it's probably purposeful. It still doesn't change the fact, but it's really corny Eurobeat. And even though I don't think the song itself is bad, it's just, even though I get it that some of the stuff on this album is supposed to be ironic, it just gets tiring after a while. It's a very hosh-posh, really slapped-together album, and too many songs on here rely on generic Eurobeat and dubstep cliches, and I know that this stuff is meant to be ironic, I get that, but that doesn't mean that it's inherently good, and the execution still falls short. The production of this album both helps it and hurts it, in my opinion. On one instance, the production, it goes well with this type of music. It's very hectic, very loud, very in your face. There's not that much room to breathe, and I'm not that opposed to that. However, where it does seem to dwindle a bit is whenever there's a part of a song that doesn't want to be as hyper, it seems to come across a bit just poorly produced in many spots. You know, for example, a song like Gentleman, even though I thought it was an average track, I don't have too much negative to say there. I really liked the saxophone as well. It all just feels so dry and lifeless, and that's how a lot of this album feels. It's as for an album as hyper as it is lacking any life, and unfortunately, it does drag it down. And the songs flow into each other, just one after another, and they all blend together. There's a total lack of variation on this album as well. Now, do I have only negative stuff to say about this album? No, I think that it's experimental, it's out there. And if this is what they are trying to go for, they definitely got it. That doesn't mean I'm going to necessarily enjoy it that much, so. And I do think that a lot of the tracks on here could have been better executed. Didn't have to be nearly as just hectic as they were. And the thing that annoys me is that you can make experimental, pop music without it just being so sloppily put together. I have heard Charlie XCX, for example, do something similar, just a little bit, and execute it so much better. So it's disappointing to hear Dorian Electra actually do an album like this. However, I wasn't completely disappointed. I was left just somewhere in the middle, but not that happy. At the end of the day, I've settled on giving this album a strong 4 out of 10. Now, yes, that is a negative review. Anything above a 5 is good, anything below a 5 is bad. So in a sense, this is a negative review, but it's still in that average tier. It's right somewhere in the middle. And I was hoping I'd like it a lot more. However, I just think that this glitchy sound of Dorian Electra, of 100 gecs, needs to be worked on much more. It needs to be polished. It needs to be well executed and well focused. And unfortunately, I didn't get that from this album. I haven't gotten that from many of their albums or a lot of other albums from this style of music, unfortunately. So unfortunately, Dorian Electra, my agenda, 4 out of 10. See you next time.